They say there's no business like show business, and by the spring of 1924, well, you can see why. The Hollywood industry is maturing every day, and we are seeing some truly iconic films. But it's not just Hollywood putting on a show this season. Even the officials of the British Empire have a spectacle they want the whole world to see. This is Between Two Wars Season 2, a chronological summary of the interwar years, where we cover the zeitgeist, the culture, the technology, the art, the sports, and much, much more in the era when, for better or worse, humanity ushered in modern times. I'm Indy Neidell. The main conspirators of the Munich beer hall putsch are convicted of treason this April and sentenced to 5 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 6 months. Nazi leader Adolf Hitler is taken to a pleasant room in Landsberg prison, where he begins dictating his autobiography and manifesto, Mein Kampf. Economically speaking, it does look like there may be better times coming for Germany. The International Committee under Charles Dawes has submitted its plan for the reorganization of the country's finances, and it's been met with approval from the major powers, with a reparations conference planned to open next season. Looking towards Southern Europe, a democratic election is held in Italy this April. Benito Mussolini's nationalist coalition of fascist and nationalist parties wins a landslide after widespread voter intimidation. Real democracy has at least been in action in Greece. 70% of voters in a referendum approved of the country becoming a parliamentary republic. Looking away from the drama of international politics to the drama of Hollywood, one of America's greatest comedic talents has released his most original film yet this April, Buster Keaton's Sherlock Jr. Joseph Frank Keaton was born in Kansas in 1895 to a poor family of vaudeville performers, vaudeville being the variety theater shows that dominated American show business before the rise of film. Apparently, he got his nickname when he was still a baby and took a tumble down a flight of stairs. Family friend Harry Houdini, picked him up and exclaimed, "My, what a buster." The story is likely a myth, especially the Houdini part, but Buster certainly earned the nickname from a young age, performing with his parents in their Three Keatons act when he was just a toddler. This mainly revolved around Buster playing a disobedient son whose drunk Irish father would throw him around as discipline. Buster was basically a living prop. He even had a suitcase handle sewn into his costume so his father could get a good grip. He'd be thrown into windows, tables, even into the audience itself. The comedy lay in the fact that Buster had the unique ability to escape everything unhurt. His mastery at taking a fall at such a young age quickly made him the star of the show. Fast forward to now, 1924, and he has left the old world of vaudeville far behind and is one of the biggest names in the new world of Hollywood. He is not quite as famous as Charlie Chaplin, nor as rich as Harold Lloyd, but he is respected for the art he brings to his work. This is mainly thanks to his experience on the vaudeville circuit. His stunts are daring, visually mind-boggling, and all done with a consistently somber face, adding to the surreal feeling of his work. He also regularly improvises in front of the camera, directing his cameramen to take wide shots so he has space to change the scene's direction as he pleases, and they only stop filming when Buster says so. He has directed and starred in 19 short films and 2 feature films. Released April 21st, Sherlock Jr. makes it 3. It is one of the first examples of a film within a film, and tells the story of a small-town boy working as a movie projectionist who dreams of becoming a detective. The boy is framed by a rival for stealing a watch belonging to the father of a girl he loves. Despondent at his misfortune, Buster's character falls asleep while working in the projection booth at the movie theater. His dream self leaves the booth, climbs over the pit orchestra, and into the screen. Now a part of the film, he becomes Sherlock Jr. and works to uncover a dastardly plot. The people from his real life replace the characters originally on the screen. It's an ambitious film, full of on-camera illusions and stunts. In one scene, Buster runs along a moving train and jumps to cling onto a water tank spout. The plan was for the spout to slowly lower him down, but it unexpectedly let out a surge of water, slamming him down onto the steel train tracks. Knowing to stop filming only when Buster says to stop filming, the cameraman just kept on rolling, and the scene actually made it into the film. Buster will discover that he broke his neck in the fall. The dream sequence of the movie also allows Buster to explore some more surrealistic styles. In one particularly famous sequence, Buster jumps headfirst into a small suitcase, disappearing completely, an old vaudeville trick he learned from his father. Despite all this, the reception is actually pretty mixed, and it is the first time Buster Keaton faces serious criticism. A review in Variety declares it to be as funny as a hospital waiting room. That's a pretty biting review, actually. It's funny as a hospital waiting room, and it is also commercially disappointing. But it will be reappraised in later years with the film's originality, clever editing, and impressive stunts, inspiring filmmakers well into the century. But Buster is just one star working in a whole industry that is maturing every day. This April, one of the most iconic companies in Hollywood history is born. Roughly speaking, the movie industry's supply chain is comprised of production, distribution, and exhibition. The producer makes the film, the distributor markets the film, and the exhibitor displays the film. Until recently, a different company ran each part of that chain, but that is now changing. New York businessman Marcus Lowe is one of the men responsible for this. He started on the exhibition side, pioneering small-time vaudeville shows, a mixture of movie screening and live performances. By 1911, Lowe's Theaters Incorporated ran 40 small-time vaudeville theaters throughout New York City. By 1919, he had Wall Street backing and was one of the largest bookers of movies in the whole country. But Lowe grew worried that he might run out of quality films to show in his theaters. To ensure a steady supply, he bought up the distributor Metro Pictures in 1920. Under Lowe, Metro distributed The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, the Rudolph Valentino anti-war epic I spoke about in the winter of 1921, and distributed all of Keaton's films. But other than these big successes, Lowe was still struggling to secure the quality films he wanted, so he decided to go into production as well. Earlier this year, he bought the struggling Goldwyn Pictures, and this April has entered a partnership with famed producer Louis B. Mayer. Lowe now controls the production, distribution, and exhibition of films, and a Hollywood powerhouse is born. Their movies are released as a Metro-Goldwyn picture produced by Louis B. Mayer. Soon they will restyle themselves Metro-Goldwyn Mayer, MGM, with that famous lion as their logo. Lowe isn't the only one doing this. In cooperation with Paramount Pictures, famous Players Lasky is doing the same, but from the opposite direction, buying up or controlling theaters to ensure films from their studios get a consistent showing. Hollywood's supply chain is increasingly becoming concentrated in a handful of companies, having far-reaching changes for the scale of movie production and the artistic direction of stars like Buster. Story for another time, though. Away from Hollywood, another powerful institution is putting on a show. The British Empire exhibition opens on April 23rd. Now, if you watched season 1 of Between Two Wars, you will know the British Empire is facing some existential questions. It's at the zenith of its size, spanning a quarter of the Earth's landmass, and with a population of 450 million people, which is 20 to 25% of the global total. But imperial authority is also being challenged everywhere. There is an increasingly troublesome independence movement in India. Japan and America may squeeze British influence out of the Pacific, and the Dominions are continually pushing for more autonomy. The British government has responded to all of this with a mixture of repression, concession, and persuasion. The Empire exhibition, well, this is the persuasion part. It is officially opened by King George V and Queen Mary, April 23rd, St. George's Day. The official guidebook sums up the intention of the exhibition. The United Kingdom will show that she is still the supreme manufacturing company. The dominions and colonies calling for settlers will show the new life which they offer, displaying what they can produce. But this great exhibition is more than a display of goods and chattels. It is a family party of the British Empire, the first family party since the Great War, when the whole world opened astonished eyes to see that an empire with 100 languages and races had but one soul and mind. Let us come and see it with empire eyes and rejoice in this display of a giant's strength. And a display it is. It is held in the London suburb of Wembley, in a sprawling site of neoclassical buildings housing exhibits from the dominions and colonies, palaces of industry, replicas of exotic temples and pavilions, and even a fairground. At the center is the Empire Stadium. With a capacity of 120,000, it is the largest sporting facility in the world. The running theme throughout is the empire's role in civilizing the world. In colonial pavilions, visitors are shown how the authorities have built telephone lines, train systems, industrial facilities, and also highlighted is the work of Christian missionaries in educating native peoples. The West African Pavilion even has a specially built native village and native workshop where visitors can look at the lives and work of various West African peoples who have been brought over specially for this event. It is to show how all races are partaking in the spirit of imperial cooperation, although it is also made crystal clear which race will be leading the others. In tandem with the exhibition, the Board of Education has begun publishing the Weekly Bulletin of Empire Study for schools. The child races of the world must be saved from slavery, disease, and ignorance, cured, cleansed, taught, and guarded. These are noble tasks. They call for knightly qualities in the governing races. The exhibition is set to continue until October 1925. Next episode, we will see a famous name review it and some more of its promises of a utopian future. But in a different vein, race relations are now also on the mind of American lawmakers. On May 24th, a new Immigration Act, the Immigration Act of 1924, is signed into law by President Calvin Coolidge. Also known as the Johnson-Reed Act, it authorizes the creation of a U.S. Border Patrol and a cap of 165,000 on immigrants from outside the Western Hemisphere. It also puts a quota on immigration from countries equal to 2% of their representation in the 1890 U.S. Census. If that sounds familiar, it's because this is the more permanent variety of the 1921 Emergency Quota Act, talked about back then. Most importantly, this act bans immigration from all of Asia not already prohibited by previous legislation. It is the latest stage in the long-standing Yellow Peril, a vaguely defined set of ideas about East Asians posing a threat to white Westerners. It took on increasing significance in America when Chinese immigration started to increase in the 1850s. Alongside mob violence, legislation was quickly implemented to counter the supposed threat. The 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act banned all Chinese laborers from entering the country, and the Immigration Act of 1917 then created an Asiatic barred zone, essentially a list of countries from where immigration to America was banned. The list notably did not include Japan, but the 1924 Act changes that and is more or less the final piece of the puzzle in banning all Asian immigration. In the years following this act, immigration to America will decrease by over 50%. Because the act uses the 1890 census, which was before large waves of Southern and Eastern European immigrants came to America, post-1924 immigration will remain dominated by people from Northern and Western Europe. And that ends the spring of 1924, a season of Hollywood, imperial display, and racial hierarchies. I'll end this with a story that didn't make it into the main episode. Eccentric English inventor Henry Grindell Matthews claims that he has invented a death ray that can shoot down airplanes and wipe out armies. It has received a great deal of attention in Britain and is even discussed in the Houses of Parliament. Matthews refuses to say much about it or show it to any experts or government officials, but he happily shows it to journalists. The British Army is even interested in buying it and is concerned that he will sell it to a foreign power if they don't. It is, as you may guess, a sham, and a laughingly obvious one at that. It does tell you one thing, though, something you should already know by now. Whether it's a Hollywood comedy, an imperial exhibition, or a death ray, the people of the 1920s love a spectacle. Something else, Buster Keaton is very much old Hollywood. And last night, me and Sparty and Astrid were talking about the script, and I was joking that maybe Peter O'Toole or some other older Hollywood type person, well, not as old as Mr. Keaton, but should present this episode. Like, I'm Indy Neidell, and this is Between Two Wars Season 2, where I talk about all the things we didn't talk about the first time round. Today is Buster Keaton. Terribly funny chap, terribly funny. I knew him, you know. The last time I saw him was in Morocco in 1952. I was there with Larry, Olivier, and the three of us stayed at a Catholic girls' school. I've never seen a mother superior quite so angry. The 3 days at the school were actually rather nice, though I didn't much like the 4 days in jail. It seems that in Morocco, they frown on public nudity. If you'd like to learn about how the burgeoning Hollywood industry contributed to the rise of fascist strongmen, you can check out our Season 1 episode on that right here. And if you're itching to get your hands on some limited official edition TimeGhost merchandise, you can check out our collectibles store at the TimeGhost website. The money from that goes directly back into making series like this happen. And speaking of funding, our TimeGhost Army member of the week is Thomas Nettleton. Thomas is well, maybe he is, but I don't know. But TimeGhost is like MGM in that we produce, distribute, and exhibit our content all by ourselves. Unfortunately, we do not have Wall Street backing us to keep us going. But we do have the TimeGhost Army, responsible for everything you see, including, vague Peter O'Toole impressions. But be like Thomas, join the TimeGhost Army at patreon.com or timeghost.tv. And though I talk about old times on this channel, it's not exactly nostalgia. And here's what Buster Keaton has to say about that. If one more person tells me this is just like old times, I swear I'll jump out the window. Cheers, Buster.